Hey guys, welcome to the Mr. Constitution channel. It is 2:45. Class starts in about 15 minutes. So if you want to start the 15-minute mark, that's when class is going to start. I'm just going to let some people come on. So I'm in California where it's freaking freezing day. And there is Mr. Warhamster. Is it cold down there?
Yeah, it's been chilly last couple days.
Yeah, it's freezing here.
Your voice is coming through spotty.
Is that better?
Nope, it is not.
Okay, then
That's good. That's good right there.
Okay. Not sure why.
Are we live?
Yes, we are live.
Let me get on over there to YouTube so I can read our chat.
You don't see the chat in the...
No, chat doesn't come into StreamYard.
Yeah, it does.
What? Jeez.
Yeah, it does.
How did I never know that?
Yeah, it's just... Okay, so if you look on the upper left-hand or upper right-hand corner,
I got
it says comments.
Just can't find a box to type into.
Okay, so yeah. Oh, Stephanie? Is my voice still okay now?
That sounds great.
Okay, good.
As good as it'll ever be.
So how was your thing with your you said you were going to be on a conference call or whatever?
Yeah, with Lloyd Brunson. Yeah.
How was that?
Well, let me go through. I'm going to go through it when Doug gets here because he's going to want to weigh in on it. It was interesting. It's definitely something we want to talk about today.
Is there any merit to the notion that could be decent?
Well, if it's argued very well. I would have been proud to have written that lawsuit myself. Whether the Supreme Court takes it up or not is, that's a different question altogether. But the backstory is pretty interesting of how they got as far as they did, and that's what I'm looking forward to talking about. Chris said you were coming through like a broken Taco Bell speaker. That's good. That cracks me up.
Not sure why, but
I've been really active on Twitter like the last 4 weeks, and I've got a couple hundred followers already.
Nice.
So I put the show out there on my Twitter about 20 minutes ago. So we'll see if we get any new audience members. Make sure you put the poll up today. See if we can get some new peeps, new eyeballs.
Ooh, I forgot I have to log in.
What you munching on?
Keto yogurt with adding blueberries to it because it's blueberry.
Very good.
Ah, damn it. I made a mess. A rough couple days, actually.
Yeah, sorry to hear that.
Yesterday sucked.
Anything you want to share?
Oh, I had to put my kitten down.
Oh, yeah, I think you might have mentioned that was coming. That's always a bummer.
Yeah.
My dog is now 12 years old. My dog's now 12 years old, so I know the time's coming one of these years. I will be heartbroken.
Well, he was only 6 months old. I've had a few, obviously. my one cat was that I really bonded with was Remington, and I had him for he was probably about 2.5 years old,
I remember Remington.
and well, I don't know if it was the same Remington, because I had one before. I had two Remingtons, um, but the first Remington was the one that I got him in like 2000 and like 18, and he just was. I fell in love with that cat, dude. Oh, I fell in love with that cat. Well, he didn't. He figured out a way to get up on the roof. And one night I was really tired, and he wouldn't come down. And I just said, I got frustrated, and I said, "All right, dude," because it was like 3 days in a row where he got up on the roof, and I was trying to get him down. And the third day, I was like, "Whatever, dude, I'm done. I'll see you in the morning." Well, I never saw him again.
Mm.
That was very difficult.
We just got the headline that Sam Bankman-Fried just got denied bail and is remanded to custody.
Where?
The flight, he's in Bahamas still. Conveniently, just in time for him not to have to testify in Congress, which he was scheduled to do today.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Have we talked about that case on the air together when I talked about that? Did I tell you about when they first sent in the A team, to go look at all the forensic accountants and everything like that to look at the books, the day after the bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm.
One of the law firms there was Sullivan and Cromwell.
Oh, shocker.
Yeah. So I guess we haven't talked about it because I would have brought that up to you. So for those of you guys that don't know, I did a bunch of deep research for a presentation a while back, and Ron and I were talking just about every day going through some of this stuff. So he knows this backstory pretty well. But Sullivan and Cromwell is a law firm that basically was the U.S. intel agencies through the late 1800s and early part of the 20th century. Basically, they're the ones who engineered the annexing of Panama from Colombia so we could build the Panama Canal for, basically at the behest of our national fruit companies. Then they also were the people on the ground ahead of time when we annexed Hawaii. They were there in the Spanish-American War in 1898 when we annexed the Philippines and Puerto Rico. And then it gets really fun. A couple of their alumni were at the table at the Treaty of Versailles at the end of World War I, and that would have been John Foster Dulles and Allen Dulles, who would reemerge. They were working really closely with a Wall Street bank, which is a very private bank called Brown Brothers Harriman. Harriman at the time had just inherited the biggest fortune in U.S. history from his railroad monopoly father. They're basically were the biggest investors into the Nazi war machine. They were basically, when the Treaty of Versailles bankrupted the Germans with all these reparations for a war they didn't start, it was the Wall Street interest that went in there and bought everything up on the cheap and financed the whole war machine. This same little cabal of Northeast blue blood Republicans then tried to overthrow FDR in the business plot of 1933, which is stopped by Major General Smedley Butler. War is a Racket is the name of his book. It's worth watching.
Yep.
And then, of course, we get to World War II. And none of these people went to jail for trying to do a coup on the president because they were too powerful. Once we went to war, the Prescott Bush managed to get indicted for trading with the enemy. And there's some more of this good stuff. Then basically these same people were brought in to the war cabinet, and they founded the OSS and later the CIA. And this is all
the CFR.
Now CFR is earlier than that, and that's a Rockefeller. That's a different cabal.
You sure?
Yes, I'm 100% sure this is Rockefeller. I've been studying the heck out of this stuff. They work hand in hand quite a bit, but I would say I would characterize that Brown Brothers, Harriman, Sullivan, and Cromwell cabal is American fascists, whereas I think the Rockefeller cabal would have been a globalist from day one. Kind of different sides of the same coin. They're absolutely working together now since the 70s. If you and I have talked about that forever. But anyways, when you see Sullivan and Cromwell involved in something, you expect shenanigans. They've got 140 years to back that up. And they are still one of the most powerful law firms in America. I would put them right up there with Perkins Coie.
They basically have been around since the Civil War.
Yeah, the Sullivan in the Sullivan and Cromwell was the founder. He was much older than Cromwell was. Or I may have it the other way around. Cromwell was the original. Sullivan was the new guy. I may have it backwards, but he was the Wall Street law firm or law firm for all of the Southern plantation owners in the 1860s and 70s.
Shocker.
Yeah, and when he passed away, the Sullivan was the younger one, I'm pretty sure. And when he passed away, that's when they really got into the global espionage racket. But yeah, law firms were the intelligence agencies before we had government intelligences. And then, of course, you had the British MI6, which kind of invented the concept. And they were a bunch of London lawyers. So, do you guys enjoy that history? I
haven't even hardly cracked this book because I've been so busy, but
oh, outstanding. I have to get myself that one for Christmas. That looks like a good read. Did I show you what I'm reading right now?
Mm-mm.
I'll be right back. Hang on.
Oh, I have that. I have that volume 1 and 2.
Do you? I have an order volume 2, and I'm done. Have you read it yet?
No.
Whitney Webb's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm reading Vision of the Anointed right now.
Who wrote that?
Thomas Sowell.
Oh, of course. The other one I'm reading right now, I just ordered 2 books from Rothkopf.
In fact, let me go get that because there was something in there that was really interesting.
So, Chad, how'd you enjoy that little history lesson? Good stuff? Or did you already know it all? It's going to be a book review day.
I did this when I was reading this when I was on the plane going to Tulsa this weekend or last week. I thought this was very interesting.
Hold it up.
Vision of the Anointed by Thomas Sowell. Patterns of failure, stage 1 crisis. Some situation exists whose negative aspects the anointed propose to eliminate. Such a situation is routinely characterized as a crisis, even though all human situations have negative aspects, and even though evidence is seldom asked for or given to show how the situation at hand is either uniquely bad or threatening to get worse. Sometimes the situation described as a crisis has, in fact, already begun getting better for years. Stage 2, the solution. Policies to end the crisis are advocated by the anointed, who say that these policies will lead to beneficial result A. Critics say these policies will lead to detrimental result Z. The anointed dismiss these latter claims as absurd and simplistic, if not dishonest. Stage 3, the results. The policies are instituted and lead to detrimental result Z. Stage 4, the response. Those who attributed detrimental results Z to the policies instituted are dismissed as simplistic for ignoring the complexities involved. As many factors went into determining the outcome, the burden of proof is put on the critics to demonstrate to a certainty that these policies alone were the only possible cause of the worsening that occurred. No burden of proof whatsoever is put on those who had to confidently predicted improvement. Indeed, it is often asserted that the things would have been even worse were if it not for the wonderful programs that mitigated the inevitable damage from other factors. And there's three things that he goes through. The first one is the war on poverty, talking about how they created the war on poverty. The next one was sex education. And then the third one was criminal justice. One of the things that I found really interesting, and it's a disagree with someone on the right, and he is likely to think you obtuse, wrong, foolish, or a dope. Disagree with someone on the left, and he is likely to think you selfish, a sellout, insensitive, or possibly evil.
Emotional responses.
Absolutely.
Oh, so speaking of that Whitney Webb book, you really got to get into that one, but there's a lot in it.
I've seen her interviewed on multiple stations or multiple channels. She's been doing fantastic.
Well, here's a fun one. There's a small section talks about Ronald Reagan and his attachment to the mob in Hollywood and the music industry, and it's pretty incriminating. I mean, we knew that. I wasn't politically aware in the 80s, but if you go online and you look up Reagan, mafia, what have you, that was very well covered in the 80s. So this is not revelatory,
right?
But, there's a guy by the name of Lew Wasserman, and I need to find out whether he's related to Debbie Wasserman Schultz or not. Doesn't appear to be on the surface, but you never know.
Thank you, Gloria.
Anyways. It's that's just the opposite of the squeaky clean Reagan image, and it makes you wonder why the left media wasn't able to destroy him, because they would do that to anybody else. I mean, the information was out there. Lew Wasserman came from the Chicago and Cleveland Jewish mafia, and them and the Italians got into Hollywood and the music industry in the 30s and 40s. And basically, when Reagan became the president of the Screen Actors Guild, that's what launched his political career. But he was basically a puppet for Lew Wasserman, and Wasserman ran Hollywood for 30 years. So it's
interesting.
You would not have thought that about Ronnie Reagan.
Oh, I have not been. I have had. How do I say this? I haven't been like enamored with Reagan for a while. I think he tried to do some good things, but I think that Reagan was much more corrupt than we want to admit.
Yeah, I had always kind of thought that Reagan just kind of got duped by Bush because we knew about Bush's CIA. The guy was the head of the CIA, his vice president. So I always figured that. But then you look at his mafia connections, and internationally, the mafia works pretty closely with our intelligence agencies, the global narcotics trafficking, the mafia and the CIA. It's all tied in together. International crime organizations as well. So that's probably more to this than we know, and I'll look forward to getting deeper into the book and finding out that. Where was I going to go? You said
there's there's another guy who wrote a book that I got recently, and it was let's see here. Who's the guy who? Let's see. What was it?
While you're thinking, there was a comment in the chat about DeSantis just has a petition with the Supreme Court of Florida to impanel a grand jury to investigate any and all wrongdoing in Florida with respect to COVID-19 vaccines. I wish they wouldn't just be going about after vaccines, but it's a good step if he follows through. DeSantis got a lot of credit when he took on Disney and basically took away their special rights in that one county. And apparently they're doing a settlement, and Disney got about 98% of what they wanted. So DeSantis didn't really stand up to Disney.
Here it is. Dark Victory. Ronald Reagan, MCA, and the mob.
Ron, check your text message, Doug says. Apparently, he probably did not get the email.
I did send it to his Yahoo address. I sent it to all of his email addresses now. Every single one.
I've got 2 email addresses that I almost never. I've got too many to go around. I've got business, personal, War Hamster, Constitution.
Yeah, if you look at the email address, if you look at the email that I sent out with the invitation, it has Douglas on there like 4 times.
Yeah, I see Reagan. I see 2. Well, you have the same one twice. You have 2 Reagans at Yahoo.
One of them like defaults, it goes into his Yahoo.
Oh, Yahoo's listed too. Everything's these are all they're all double listed on my on this email here. So you got all the right ones. We'll make this a Doug error. And what else is going on? Oh, we were talking about DeSantis a second ago. I'd say it's interesting he's going to come out with this now. I mean, Elon Musk is making it pretty clear that the next set of Twitter files is going to be talking about COVID suppression.
Oh, I have something to share with you off air.
Okay. Anyways, if Twitter drops that and it's anywhere as near revelatory as some of the other stuff, you start seeing the NIH meeting with big tech and social media.
Well, I thought it was interesting that Musk shared a little white rabbit yesterday.
Is that what he did? The leftist Twitter just blew up on that one. Tell Doug I'm going to text him the invite right now. I guess I'm telling him.
Well, he doesn't have an iPhone. He has an Android, so texting him the invite isn't going to do any good.
Well, he could text it to his own email. Or I could just forward it to him again.
I just sent it to him again.
Okay. Well, we'll figure it out. Coach Mike Leach has passed away. I didn't know he was ailing. Okay. I'm sending the text momentarily.
Why? Is he asking you to send it to him again?
Yeah, read the chat.
Oh. It's probably going to spam.
All right, there he goes. Text sent, Doug. Beauty of having 2 computers.
Oh, how's that computer working for you?
It's the computer's fine. I just don't know how to. I haven't been on a Windows machine in more than a decade, so it's really confusing to me. And I just all kinds of setup things keep popping up. And since I only use it for this show and my Friday night show, I don't get a chance to play around with it. The keyboard's different, so I'm basically handicapped when I'm using it, but it does what it needs to do. So it is good. The computer's good. It's the user that is the issue.
Who's Mike Leach?
Football coach.
For who?
Oh, just was Bengals at one point, but several people.
Was he vaxxed? Sorry, can't say that.
He was a college football coach. Where did he end up at?
Oh, is that the guy that was down at Mississippi State? Or something like that?
I'm pulling it up right now. I'll give you this background. He's at Texas A&M. Oh, Texas Tech, I mean. Yeah, he was one of those guys that really opened up the offense to like the run and shoot, or the air raid, I think it was called.
Yeah, Mississippi State.
Yeah. He's a young guy, only 61. That's too bad.
I'm wondering if he had something experimental injected into him.
That's the question that pops up pretty quickly these days. I wonder why.
And I don't mean to be cold about it, but you get what you deserve when you do that.
I began checking email actually at 10 till.
What are you using in your camera, man?
It's got fingerprints all over it.
Oh.
Because my wife takes it off my computer when she uses my computer, and she sticks her fingers right on this thingamajiggy.
Your lighting is pretty poor as well.
Getting there. Okay.
Yeah,
I started checking my email at 9 till, and my ILJ wouldn't come up. Reagan forwards to ILJ. I don't use Reagan anymore, but I didn't kill it because I know a lot of people still use it.
I don't know if you paid attention, but I literally send it to every email address.
Yeah, that you have. Yahoo, regular and spam. Neither one of them shows it at all. Yeah. It never showed up.
Okay, well, so just so we are 100% clear, and I'm telling you that I'm not lying to you.
No, I don't think you're lying to me. I'm telling you that Yahoo's blocking you.
Right here.
Take that down. Take that down. My last name showing. Get that out of there. Come on, Ron.
Sorry.
I was afraid you're going to do that. No big deal.
No, I believe you. I'm not arguing with you, Ron. I'm just saying I didn't get it on either Yahoo in the spam or the regular, and ILJ is down. It said server down, so I can't even get into it. And both the ILJ and Reagan's go there. So there's nothing and they go straight to spam typically. But yeah, you're a dangerous individual. So everything either goes to spam or doesn't get to me apparently. So what I did is when Brady sent it to me on my phone, I typed into my computer what I saw on my phone. Basically, because I couldn't send it to myself because it'd probably take too long anyway. But
anyways, let's get into the show.
Just get a different email address, man.
Yeah,
get a different backup.
Well, I'm working on that, but that's not there yet.
Well, you could have yours for Constitution Restoration tomorrow. Josh,
I have one for that, but there's other things going on.
Okay. Well, let's get into the show. Let's entertain these people instead of talking about emails.
Yeah, because we're only 15 minutes late.
Yeah, it's frustrating for me because I actually was excited I was going to be early. I literally sat down at my desk.
Why didn't you call me? Why didn't you?
Well, because I was trying to figure out why I couldn't get into my email. I didn't realize immediately that's what the problem was. It takes time then to go over to Yahoo and find out it's not there. By the time I realized, it took 9 minutes. That's why I texted you at 3.
All right, goodness, let's get in.
I'm not going to call you because you're on the air.
I would have answered.
Yeah, well,
and you were the guy who's
like, well, screw it. I'll get in the chat room. That'll get their attention.
You're the star of the show. You have there's a level of importance there that I would answer.
All right.
All right.
Well, no, it's not because I don't think you'd answer. It's because it's rude to call someone while they're on the air.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's get into the show. We spend way too much time talking about why we couldn't get you on time.
Damn, guys. Damn. Left the door open. The dogs keep trying to jump into my lap, too. On top of that, this is not good. All right. Hello, everybody. Yeah, so it's frustrating for me.
So Ron, first thing he said when I got on here, quarter till, was he wanted me to talk about the Brunson call. So I think we should open with that.
By the way, Tracy says Proton Mail. I have 2 Proton Mail accounts, and every time I send anything from Proton, it bounces back. Nobody ever gets it. All of the services hate Proton for some reason, or at least coming from me, Proton. So yeah.
I don't send much out on Proton. I haven't experienced that yet.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
I'm with you, Tracy, but yeah, I have Proton as well. It works. I've
Doesn't
never
work
had
for
that
me.
issue.
Everything bounces back because it gets rejected. And if it does show up, then and then if I send things from Reagan, then they usually get a warning saying I'm dangerous and don't hit any links and stuff like that. So yeah, they're on to me. All right.
So let's talk about the
what
Brunson
are we talking
case.
about?
The Brunson case to begin with.
Okay. So for those who don't know, the Brunson brothers are a group out of Utah that sued to basically Congress for not doing their
I
duty.
noticed the brother. It starts with an L, his first name.
Yeah, there's Loy. Loy Brunson was the one that
Loy. I noticed he's been on a number of videos. I haven't watched any of them, but I've noticed he's been on a number of videos.
He's making the circuits right now.
Okay.
So he had to jump off our call to jump on another show. So he's booking himself. He's getting publicity out there. Okay. Anyways, their case was really interesting. They basically said that, look, when over 100 congressmen and senators, questioned the election, they had a duty to at least investigate, and they shirked their duties, and therefore they were, they had some pretty good constitutional language, but we'll just sum it up quickly and say they basically were a breach of their constitutional oath, and therefore they should, basically be deemed ineligible to ever run for office, to be in office or run for office again. Now that's a pretty extreme claim, but it's also pretty simple to prove. Mm-hmm. This is no high barrier of proof. It's a matter of interpretation. So Loy Brunson's brother, apparently about 15 years ago, had gotten ticked off. No, it was during the subprime crisis, and he took an online class about civil procedure, and he got pretty good at this stuff. And these guys, apparently, they got a bit of family money, and they've been in and out of courts, using civil procedures. Sounds a little bit like sovereign citizen direction they came from, but even those guys know the Constitution relatively well, and or at least one interpretation of it, and they were effective in getting through the courts. Long story short, it goes through the regular court, it goes to appeals, and it was stuck in the 10th Circuit for months and months, and they thought it was, his brother, Loy's brother, thought it was dead, and then Loy started really pressuring him, and so the guy starts digging in for homework, and he found something called Supreme Court Rule Number 11, which can fast track anything to the Supreme Court. Hi, Virginia. Which can fast track anything to the Supreme Court if it's a case of a national emergency. And they did that, and it's apparently some really strict. The court comes back to them and says, "Yeah, but you have to fill out this paperwork very specifically." And they were coaching them, telling them how to fill it out, and it's a big production. And during that process, and they, first of all, they said, "Well, how quickly can we do that? Can you give us 2 weeks?" And the Supreme Court came back and said, "No, can you do it in a week?" So Loy Brunson is making it seem like the Supreme Court really wanted to hear this. In the meantime, the 10th Circuit made a decision on the case. So they called back the Supreme Court and said, "Do you still want us to fill out the paperwork?" And they said, they told them just to file their appeal without the Rule 11 language. And it's moving forward. It's scheduled for conference on January 6th. And then will they decide whether to hear the case or not? So there's a snowball's chance in Hades that there could be something to come from this. It's a pretty well-written case. Now, what's interesting is I told Doug about this yesterday, about a Rule 11 language, and I don't know if you've had a chance to research it, but because a certain lawsuit that you've been working on is stuck in the 9th Circuit right now. So I think this may be a way to fast track. Could you determine that this is a national emergency of having someone?
Oh, absolutely. I think so. Having. Basically, the other lawsuit, the lawsuit I'm involved with is regarding Vice President of the United States and whether or not she's eligible for office. And hey, having someone who has foreign influences and is not eligible, that's a national emergency. Absolutely. Now it's funny that Conservative Cowboy brings up the Respect for Marriage Act is what they call it. I did a video this morning regarding that, but I only had a chance to record it before I had to run out the door. When I get back tonight after my Capistrano class, I will edit it and get it online. So for those of you who are members or follow or subscribe to my Rumble, my BitChute, or either one of my YouTube accounts, I'll be putting it on there tonight after I get back from Capistrano and get a chance to edit it and all that. I did a video on the Respect for Marriage Act. Now, that said, it is unconstitutional. They have no authority. And I was actually talking 2 Wednesdays ago to the treasurer of the nonprofit I'm a president of. He has a legal a law degree, and told him, that's an unconstitutional law. We got to figure something out. Now, the thing is about lawsuits is you can't just, oh, that's unconstitutional, we're suing. It doesn't work that way. There has to be someone who is injured, and then the lawsuit is regarding that injury. And then if the courts, and then we can say that the injury is as a result of an unconstitutional law. So that's how it's got to play out. So we got to wait until we have somebody that we can sue with, be a part of, that has been injured by that law, basically, because of its unconstitutionality. That's kind of how the system works.
What's Conservative Cowboy said that mentioned Marbury versus Madison. I don't understand the angle there.
What he's using is that in Marbury versus Madison, John Marshall states that, not these exact words, but basically he says that a law that is repugnant to the Constitution is not a law. So that's what he means by that.
Well,
now, the problem with that statement, while that statement is correct, then John Marshall follows it up with judicial review. It's up to the courts to strike it down. But that's a discussion.
If we're going to talk about repugnance to the Constitution, can we just review pretty much every bill passed for the last 150 years?
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's the reason why Republic Review would be in order, where the states say we're going to review every federal law, and if it's not constitutional, you're going to stop, or we're going to use our Convention of States power to make sure it's gone.
Or nullification. Yeah.
Or nullification. Either way.
Yeah, and I made the argument online recently. Gosh, I just lost my train of thought. God, it was about judicial review too. I'll come back to it if it comes back to my head. Sorry, total space.
That's what happens when you have all that stress from people showing emails on the screen.
Yeah, beautiful. Try so hard not to dox myself, and I have to. But unfortunately, when you're friends with Ron Partain, that just doesn't work sometimes.
Whatever.
Hey, I thought I'd read Rule 11, Supreme Court Rule 11. It's just
let's talk about that.
It's called certiorari.
Certiorari.
Thank you.
Or certiorari. Certiorari is how George pronounces it, but I've heard it certiorari as well.
It's spelled certiorari, so we'll go with that. Anything's better than what I just tried. To a United States Court of Appeals before judgment. So what they're saying is, can you leap ahead of waiting on an appeals? And the answer is, a petition for a writ of certiorari to review a case pending in a United States Court of Appeals before judgment is entered into that court will be granted only upon a showing that the case is of such imperative public importance as to justify deviation from normal appellate practice and to require immediate determination in this court. See 28 U.S.C. -2101E. So really, if you show it's that important or that imperative, they will skip you to the front of the line. Yeah, it's brand new to me. I mean, I've been watching the case, and I just learned that yesterday. So that's something that now that it's out in the wild, with Mr. Brunson making the PR rounds, I have a feeling the Supreme Court's going to get an awful lot of Rule 11 appeals coming pretty soon. So my recommendation is, Doug, get on it quickly.
Well, if it's any consolation, when I was in Tulsa this past weekend, both Flynn and Lindell were talking about it, and they both were like, this is like a moonshot.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really anything that's probably gonna, people are getting all excited about it when they really shouldn't be.
Well, that's the response we've gotten regarding the lawsuit against the Vice President of the United States. Well, it's just another birther case kind of attitude, and it's not going anywhere, and so on and so forth. And therefore, since the enemy or the opposition thinks that it's ridiculous, we're just not supposed to try. And that's not the right answer.
No, and I've said every single time I've talked about the Brunson case, I've said it's a snowball's chance. You know, but there's the fact that it's gotten this far is very surprising. Whether it goes to the next step, unlikely. Whether they rule in the favor we'd like to see, there's a lot of obstacles to overcome. But goodness, that is a big ask. Basically, firing 2/3 of Congress. So, that's they're gonna.
Well, I mean, and I'll be honest with you, if I would love I would love for that to actually transpire. I think that would be fantastic. But I think it's extremely unrealistic, sadly.
Yeah. That's why that's why I've paid so much more attention to Moore versus Harper, which has the ability to be just as profound and a lot more long-lasting in terms of states being able to set their own election law.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, for that to be properly effective, and kind of throw back in their face the idea that there's no check against state legislature, we have to go back to being a republic, because that's really where the check originally existed.
Yeah, well, and this is why we've got the right Supreme Court. This is the best Supreme Court to bring these cases we've ever had. Which I remembered what I was going to say about Marbury versus Madison. So the discussion I was in, basically I said, no, I go, where did the Supreme Court get the power to determine what was constitutional? And it's not in the Constitution, and there's only one way to change the Constitution. That process did not take place, therefore judicial review shouldn't matter. And the question that comes back to me is, well, who determines constitutionality? I go, see the 10th Amendment. That which it was not given away to anyone else, therefore it is left to we the people and the states, or we the people.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that,
exactly. So the states and the people are the final arbiters of the Constitution, as per the Constitution.
Yeah, that's kind of how the case should read, if we want to ever take on judicial review.
GH says that anybody still interested in 2020 is clearly unconcerned about wasting time. Sadly, I tend to agree.
Well, I don't think
I have a lot of people in my life that feel that way. I still believe it needs to be a part of the conversation. I'm not going to throw it brush it under the rug because I've been told I'm supposed to by the opposition. Now that said, it's not a waste of time, because just because they've got control of so many facts, and when I say they, I don't just mean the Democrats. I mean anti-constitution, anti-liberty, Republicans, independents, whatever. Basically, anybody who's not willing to stick to the original intent of the Constitution is part of the problem. Just because they want to brush under the rug doesn't mean I should. That's the reason why we're in trouble, because every time they say, well, you don't have a chance, and everybody goes, okay. No, you push it. You push it and you push it until finally you get heard.
Yeah,
so I disagree.
That leads into the
well,
way.
Let me I understand what you're saying there, but I think what he's talking about is actually taking legal action against it is not going to be productive.
I disagree again, because using the framework that the Kari Lake case provided, I think, is the way to roll. The problem is not going after it, whether or not you should go after it. It's how you do it. Yeah. And in the case of Kari Lake's case, it's not about whether or not there was issues, but whether or not procedures were followed.
And that's exactly the point I've been making. And politicians should have used this talking point. There were enough anomalies or questions that a reasonable person can ask about the 2020 election. Things were not done according to customs and law. The fact that those questions were asked and our grievances weren't redressed is the issue. They were ignored, and that is a problem. If enough people, they can poll 62% of the people in America thought that there's something wrong with that election. The fact that those grievances aren't addressed is an issue. That means that Washington, D.C. is acting tyrannically. The questions need to be answered. It's not about overturning an election. It's about making sure we have a process that works, because that is not how a free society. Yeah, a free society does not function in a way that a serious grievance cannot be addressed. You don't censor people
right.
when they ask questions.
But my point is also that people misread what's going on here. Just like the Kamala case. It's, were you trying to get rid of Kamala? No. The purpose of the case is not get rid of Kamala. I mean, that's a happy result. That's cherry on top. No, it's because I want to get the definition of natural born citizen codified by the courts or by the Congress or somewhere, so that we have people who are not eligible stop running. The fact that she would be removed from office as a result is, like I said, well, that's a happy result that goes along with it. But that's not the reason for the case. And so, same thing here. The reason for 2020 is not because of that election itself is such a big deal, because we want to make sure that things don't happen again, that procedures are followed once again. So that's why I like the way Kari Lake, took it up. And of course, the best way to avoid any issues, irregularities, anomalies, and so forth is to get back to, number one, no such thing as mail-in ballots, only absentee. In other words, you request it because for a good reason. And number two, precinct counting the votes locally.
Did you hear what happened in Arizona, in Maricopa? They're doing the recount on the 3 close races, and they won't let Republicans into the room.
Of course not.
You got to have transparency if you want to have trust. You're going to have these questions come up over and over again if you're not transparent. The fact that they're not, a reasonable person is going to conclude that they're up to no good. And that's not a way to have you have no intention of living in a civil society if you're not being transparent.
Right.
So, can we prove that there's all this malicious intent? Well, it hasn't been proven in a court of law yet, but they certainly they've given us plenty of reason to ask the questions. And we're going to keep asking.
Very good. Anything else that either one of you would like to add? Ron, Brady?
Nope. I think we've. This is.
You're operating like you're an innocent bystander.
Oh, I'm multitasking. I got a lot to do, so I'm listening in.
He's just along for the ride.
Well, I will. I found out that. Well, I shouldn't say that on air. I'll tell you guys after. But it's suffice it to say that my life has become extremely more complicated over the course of the last 5 days.
Okay. Even more complicated than after other issues that happened before that. Well, that's got to be complicated.
Much more so. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll talk later on. So now, Darren then says the question then is, what are we going to do about it? And that's the point of. And here's the thing: someone says, "Well, you're not going to win your lawsuit." Is the point of the lawsuit just the lawsuit? Because see, by getting it in the court, it's like, for example, one of the happenstances that's going on, and I'm going to get into names and details just yet, is there is a particular member of the House of Representatives that is considering using the case regarding the vice president as a foundation for a consideration for impeaching articles of impeachment against the vice president. Now, someone says, well, Doug, the articles of impeachment, the way the Senate looks, you need 2/3. It'll never happen. The purpose, just like with going after number 45, the purpose of the impeachment was not removal from office. It was more than that. It was something different. Same thing here. The purpose of trying to impeach the vice president wouldn't be whether or not there'd be success, but what it does is it puts more eyeballs on what it is. It gets it out to the public square a little bit more. The idea is that we want the court of public opinion to eventually be involved in this. Right now, hardly anybody knows about it, but it's so big, the court of public opinion should be involved. So whether or not we can pull it off in the courts, I don't know, but it definitely draws in the court of public opinion, or at least certain parts of the court of public opinion. And then if word of mouth takes off, then it gets out there. And 90% of what you have to do here to get back our republic begins with just informing people, getting people to know.
Well, there's a there's a board out there that has some drops on it, and one of the things that they said on this is that you cannot tell the people, you have to show the people.
Well, it's interesting with the Twitter opening up. I think a lot more people are asking a lot more questions now that it's become a much more open dialogue.
Right.
And that's kind of a good thing. My inherent distrust of Elon Musk is I'm starting to warm to him a little bit for his recent actions.
Right.
This has been a good thing. The Twitter files have been a good thing.
I have to say, if you judging somebody by his exclusively by his actions and not necessarily by what we perceive his beliefs to be, I think he has shown himself to be very good for the cause of freedom of speech. Now, one thing that he did say that I will note, and I agree with, is that he said, I didn't. I was like, people think that I'm making this for the conservatives. I'm not making this for the conservatives. I'm just allowing the conservatives to be able to fight, to actually have a seat at the table in the conversation, because the conservatives have been left out of the conversation. He says, I'm not restricting the left speech. I'm just not restricting the right speech.
Right. Yeah, we talked about that before. Well, and there are different ways to tackle these things, and I think Darren's comment in the chat kind of also goes to that. He says, "So corrupt courts don't yield results. Corrupt anything doesn't yield results, but yet it does. It's like, you going into corrupt courts or going after corrupt legislatures or whatever. It says, well, there's nothing you can do because they're not going to change. I don't expect them to change. I'm expecting them to be exposed. And corrupt courts can yield results when the result is they're exposed for their corruption because of what they're doing, and more eyeballs are on it. So once again, using the courts is important, even if you're not going to get too far in the courts themselves, because people are watching. There are things that get out there to the public square. It's more than just the courts. Let's not be narrow-minded and think that everything is about a narrow thing. We need to be able to think beyond the tip of our nose. We need to realize, not that I'm accusing you of anything or doubting you, Darren. It's a good observation, but there's always more than you see, and there's always more possible than you expect. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Well, the problem with a lot of these issues is they become so polarized and partisan, and they shouldn't be.
Right.
Reasonable people should be able to have these conversations. And unfortunately, the media is heavily invested in keeping the right versus left narrative alive. But at the end of the day, what we're really talking about is a government that's taken on way more power than it had any right to do. Mm-hmm. And those of us who are asking it we want to rein it back in. We're asking the questions. Unfortunately, we have to use the government system in place that is in place to correct itself. And that's hard. It's a tough ask. But it can only be done with a reasonable discourse and not partisanship. And this hyper-polarized world we sit in right now, it's only a good thing if the conversation opens up like it is on Twitter. So I'm probably never going to trust Elon Musk because he's a transhumanist. I just don't buy that.
And, again, that's what that is what we believe.
Well, I've read his own words, and I can explain away some of it. There's also a benign version of transhumanism, and that's the case he makes. But what was really interesting is somebody sent me a text with a link of 9 books that Elon Musk is recommending anybody read this year. And 4 of those I've read, and the other few that I read the brief summary of them. I go, these are books that somebody with an open mind and actually good intentions would want to read. One of them is like the danger of transhumanism, of dangers of AI, what we need to avoid. Well, that's a good thing, because AI is dangerous potentially. So right now I'm warming up to Elon more than I ever thought I would, but I'm going to remain skeptical until the end. The man's just got. When you have that, what do I always say? It's the concentration of wealth and power that's the problem, that we face, that causes most of the problems. You're talking about the richest man in the world. So that's concentrated power and influence right there.
Well,
so
one of them, but I don't. Is he the richest
allegedly
man in the world?
Well, we can, I'd probably say the Rockefellers are, but we can't prove that. Forbes says he's the richest man in the world. Fair enough. Actually, apparently he moved to second place when Tesla stock dropped.
Okay.
When we say we, to answer GH, don't mean we as in maybe just here. The we is bigger than that. There's people who follow the freedom movement or follow the freedom movement. It depends on which venue. This is one of my smaller venues. And I may have a lot or a little, but it doesn't matter. If something's right, I don't care if only one person's listening to me. If something's right and it's about liberty, it needs to be said. This is not a competition. This is with you. And it's not just because it's small, I guess I shouldn't say anything. No, right is right and wrong is wrong. And if I believe something be right, I should say something about it. I should be able to say something about it. And if a lot of people want to start listening, great. But I don't get that if I don't open my mouth in the first place.
Exactly.
So, Stephanie makes a decent point. It's GH. Your questions come across as very disingenuous, and you're not here to be part of the conversation. You're here to disrupt it. So, Ron, if you want to police that a little bit, I'd appreciate it. It's not conducive to what we're here to talk about, which is the Constitution. And that's my thoughts on that. A couple other stories that are interesting.
Well, I'm not gonna like. You talk about
that last one doesn't even deserve a response.
Yeah, we're not playing that game.
Yeah.
Go elsewhere to troll.
Yeah.
Well, we'll ignore him unless you don't.
Well, there's some of the things he's put in there has had a little bit of a legitimate concern, and I do want to address what someone who doesn't necessarily agree with me has to say. If it's a reasonable question or comment.
Yeah,
but when it becomes nothing more than just a disruption, then there's no need to continue.
I just put him in timeout for 300 seconds so we can move on. I'll let Ron make the decision on whether to remove him or not. I just it's not conducive. It's not conducive to the conversation.
I typically don't like. I just don't like to. I don't like to silence.
I prefer not to zap people.
Yeah, but it's. I would agree.
But I would ask respectively, GH, that you would provide questions or comments that are constructive to the conversation.
Yeah, and it's when our other regular guests like Stephanie are complaining about it, that's when I say we got to do something about it, because it's pretty noticeable that this is just a troll attempt.
I didn't. You know what? I didn't pick up on what Stephanie said. Okay.
Yeah, when our regular guests or watchers are being annoyed by it, that's because that's too disruptive.
Then fair enough. I will listen to. I will listen to Stephanie. So all right. So when he comes out of timeout, if he doesn't behave, then I'll zap him.
Appreciate that. And we don't mind criticism, or
Yeah, it's not that we don't want the other side willing to hear what the other side has to say, but if it's not for the purpose of dialogue, it's for the purpose of disruption, then that's different.
Okay, if it's just for, okay, so here's my thing: if the people who were here to listen are having an issue with him, then I'll zap him. But if the people here who, like you and I, who we can actually like get rid of the guy, we can just ignore him, then I prefer to let him rant. But if the listeners want me to take him, then I'll listen to them.
To answer,
especially
which is probably the same person, just now under a different sign up. See, the thing about perception is, for the left, that everything's about perception. But with me, it's not about perception; it's about the truth. That's the difference. And the truth is on our side. The truth is on the originalist Constitution side. It's funny because I was reading an article regarding Morvey Harper, and it basically said, well, yeah, but this idea of the state legislatures, having sole authority over elections, that has been, I can't remember the term, but it's basically, because of consensus, it no longer is the way we believe kind of attitude. And my attitude is, just because a bunch of people have decided to think something is in disagreement with the truth doesn't make it, because that's the perception, more people will believe it. It doesn't make it the truth. It's just a perception. The truth is still the truth. And so, you know, I just like to hang out in the realm of truth and facts. Now, I do have my opinions. I give my opinions, and I think they're true, and you think your opinions are true. But in the long run, it comes down to what is provable.
Yeah, and reasonable people can disagree.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah, it's to me, I don't mind people questioning. You know, in fact, I enjoy people questioning my thoughts, and we can get into an objective conversation. That's how you discover truth.
Mhm.
But you know, we saw, you know, he was being rude, he was being destructive. That there was nothing there that was trying to induce a constructive conversation. If you have questions or you disagree, go ahead and put it in the chat, because we have no problem defending our own ideas.
So yeah, here's the question. So should the Brunson case, for example, be something into the discussion? Well, it doesn't have a chance. Well, maybe it does, but it needs to be in the discussion because of it brings a serious question to the table. Whether or not it has potential, whether or not there's people listening is not the point. It's based on truth, and the truth is there was a problem. There is evidence showing there were irregularities and so on and so forth. So therefore, it needs to at least be looked at least addressed and reviewed. And that's what the Brunson case is all about.
Yeah, well, Derek asked, are we allergic to talk about the Brunson case? No, we opened with that, Derek, today. So if you weren't here for the beginning, you're going to want to watch the replay. Real quickly, I was on a conference call yesterday, a Zoom call, where Lloyd Brunson spoke for about 30 minutes. And it was interesting. My impression of the guy was, he was a guy you'd sit down next to at a bar and have a decent conversation with. He didn't come across as pompous
Right.
or any kind of a maniac or anything like that. Just seemed like a normal Utah guy. He's he comes across as very affable, not insane or anything like that. And he was articulate and made his case in a relatively concise manner. But we did talk about that.
Now, did you bring when you had that discussion with him? Did you bring up the Moore v. Harper case at all? Is he following that as well?
There was about 50 people on that Zoom call. These are the people that were involved.
So it wasn't a personal conversation.
No, it was not. I was invited onto the Zoom call, and I was not one of the moderators.
Okay.
I would have liked to have. If he'd stuck around for questions, I would have brought that up because it's an interesting one. They are somewhat related.
Mm-hmm.
But
absolutely, they are.
It wasn't the right forum for that. I didn't get the opportunity.
All right, very good.
All right, great. GH is back. I hope you can act respectfully. I apologize for having to do that, but one of our other users was complaining, and I thought it was appropriate. So feel free to criticize or ask, questions in a polite manner. We're more than happy to address anything.
Yeah, when I was talking about the attitude towards certain original constitutional concepts, the word that those who the Constitution of them is not the original, it's more of a Hamiltonian view or a case law view, is debunked. And so there's an article from the Brennan Center about Moore v. Harper, and it opens, in Moore v. Harper, the Supreme Court will decide whether the North Carolina Supreme Court has the power to strike down the legislature's quote unquote illegally gerrymandered congressional map for violating the North Carolina Constitution. The legislatures have argued that a debunked interpretation of the U.S. Constitution, known as the independent state legislature theory, renders the state courts and state constitution powerless in matters relating to federal elections. This is not a debunked theory. It's what the Constitution says. Why they call it a debunked theory is because they've decided that even though the founders said otherwise, the founders didn't mean that. It's their interpretation that's more important than what any of the founders said. And that's why it's quote unquote debunked. I've dealt with this with a person in my Capistrano class. It says, well, your version of the Constitution is debunked, and you're the only person I know that looks at it that way, except for maybe Clarence Thomas, which actually was a compliment. I'm like, it's like he was trying to make it sound bad that I was speaking like Clarence Thomas. But no, it's because in your little group, and this goes back to this article, it's been debunked, doesn't mean it has been. It means that your little group has, or has decided it is. But it says what it says. There's no mention of the courts in the Constitution. If you don't like it, then change it. instead of just saying, oh, well, that's not what it means. No, that's what it says. The courts have no business being involved. It's a state legislature issue.
Yeah, and that's really what was argued in front of the Supreme Court last week in Moore versus Harper, is who actually has the check on the state legislature. And one side says it should be the state courts. Moore's side is arguing, no, that's not what the Constitution says, because this is a federal issue that state legislatures are empowered by the U.S. Constitution. State courts have no business in that. So who's the ultimate check? Because there's always got to be a check. Now, there's a procedural check by the governor in the form of a veto, which can only be overcome by a supermajority. And then there's the ultimate check of a runaway state legislature, which is we the people. Now, you talk about gerrymandering being. Do you want to report to that, or do you want me to go to gerrymandering?
The idea of what gerrymandering, and it is pronounced gerrymandering, not gerrymandering, drives me nuts when people say gerrymandering. But I'm sorry, I'm kind of a pronunciation Nazi on that one. But Elbridge Gerry, Gerre, who was actually at the Constitutional Convention as well, when he ran for office or ran for re-election, and they redrew the lines. And the lines were redrawn in a manner to favor him so he could be reelected. And one of the local newspapers said that the district looked like a salamander. And since it was for Elbridge Gerry, that would make it a gerrymander. So that's where it comes from. That's where that term comes from. Now, that said, most of the founders believe that district lines should be drawn in a grid manner that kept communities together. But it's hard, but some of the grids boxes would be bigger than others because you want to try to keep the populations about the same. And of course, the grid is fine, but sometimes you do got to kind of go around the lines or move the lines a little bit to make sure certain communities together. But once the gerrymandering started, it's been something that's been involved all along. Does that make it okay? Absolutely not. But the question here, really, the problem is in Moore v. Harper is everybody wants to draw attention to the gerrymandering. That's not the issue at stake here.
Exactly.
That is the symptom. The issue is whether or not the courts have the authority from a constitutional standpoint to dictate to a state legislature what they can or can't do regarding the matters and procedures of elections. And when it comes to what's in the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 4, it's completely up to the state legislatures. To answer Darren, doesn't state constitutions have to run alongside the U.S. Constitution? Yes or no? When it comes to the authorities of the federal government, then the state constitution cannot be contrary to that. When it comes to certain things that the states can or can't do, and Article 1, Section 10 has a whole list of stuff the states can't do, for example. The state constitution is supposed to run is not supposed to run contrary. It's not supposed to be contrary. But if an issue is not given to the federal government and it's not prohibited to states, then the state constitution can do what it wants. And that's kind of what the state constitution is about. Because remember, get back to the 10th Amendment, only certain authorities are granted, or should I say delegated, as it says in the 10th Amendment, to the federal government. If it's not delegated to the federal government and it's not prohibited to the states, it's a state authority, period. And that's what the state constitutions are all about, for them to do what they want to do regarding those authorities. Now, that said, a lot of these state constitutions, when it comes to state versions of certain things, do run, for the most part, alongside the U.S. Constitution. For example, Amendment 4, where it talks about unreasonable searches and seizures, that's language to the federal government. It doesn't apply to the states, but the states loved that language, believed it is a right also that they should carry on. So if you look at the state constitutions, they all have language when it comes to search and seizure similar, if not almost exactly the same as the Fourth Amendment. And they've decided to run alongside the Constitution on that. But on that one, if they wanted to just tweak it a little bit, they could, because that applies to the federal government. Now, that said, we forget that the people and the other constituencies, states or counties, depending on what level we're talking about, are supposed to also have a say. We seem to think that if a constitution, state constitution or federal constitution says something, that there's nothing we can do about it. There's plenty we can do about it. You can vote people out. You can hold Article 5 conventions. You can convince your state to nullify. I mean, there's things that can be done. And that's what constitutionalism is largely about, is the things that can be done when the recipe is not being followed properly or the roadmap has been scribbled all over.
Yeah, and speaking of scribbling,
go ahead.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Gerrymandering is a symptom, and that's what Moore versus Harper was about, allegedly. Look, gerrymandering is a major problem. Both parties do it. Republicans used to be better at it. This last cycle, the Democrats actually won more gerrymandered districts in the courts than the Republicans did. But that's not how we should have our elections decided, is by courts, partisan courts ruling on who drew the best map. Now, they've got some formulas, the 7% rule and stuff like that. But it's an issue that needs to be solved. It should be solved in a nonpartisan manner. I don't like the fact that either Republicans or Democrats are gerrymandering. And everyone knows I'm on record of saying I'd like to get rid of the national political parties altogether. And maybe that would solve part of that. Basically what you want is you want the election to reflect the will of the voters in a state. That's, if we can all agree on that as a starting point, then, and that addresses GH's question for me. Are we whining about 2020? No, it's a matter of principle. We want to have free and fair elections. I am not a Republican. I am not a Democrat. I can't stand either political party. But I sure the heck don't want to live in a country where I can't trust the results because partisan actors appear to be putting their finger on the scale.
Exactly. Exactly.
Go ahead.
Can I add,
please,
that the Democrats were the ones that were complaining about the 2016 election for 4 years. They were complaining about the he was an unjustified president or a non-elected president, not my president. I mean, they did that crap for 4 years. And if you go back and as early as the 90s, the Democrats were the ones that were raising the issues about the voting machines and all that stuff, going back into the 90s and the 2000s. And
it was such a big deal that they basically put together a bipartisan commission headed by Jimmy Carter. And this was back in like 2003 or 4. And they said they had a number of findings. And one of them was that voting machines and vote by mail presented more opportunity for fraud. And that's basically what we knew this stuff 15, 20 years ago. We've known it for 200 years. Look, there's been fraud in elections since we've had elections. You just go into your search engine and type in Tammany Hall. Go back to 1960, where the Chicago Mafia threw Illinois for JFK.
Those accusations going all the way back to the early 1800s on a few.
The question isn't whether there is cheating in elections. The question is it enough? Look, what we really want to do is get to a point where a vast majority of people trust the results, that we have a representative government. And we don't have that right now. And we don't have that for 2020 because the legitimate questions that a reasonable person could ask were never addressed. Instead, we were censored, banned. Some people were locked up for expressing their First Amendment rights. That's not okay. That's not how a free society functions. Let's have a conversation.
And basically what is going on is that if your party wins the election, then everything is honest. If your party loses the election, then everything is dishonest.
Now, Darren says, but our unalienable rights are in the U.S. Constitution, 1778. You meant 1787, I'm sure. You flipped those last two numbers. Not all of them are. Only certain ones are. And then when you read that, it doesn't say, unalienable rights that must be then protected and secure, or not secure, protected and guaranteed by federal government. That's not what it says. What's the language? First Amendment, Congress shall make no law. Into the Second Amendment, shall not be infringed. Beginning of the Third Amendment, no soldier shall. Be in the middle of the Fourth Amendment, shall not be violated. That's not language telling government they have to guarantee you your rights. That's language telling the government, hands off your rights. None of their business. The way our rights operate is they belong to us. They're not defined by government. They're not controlled by government. They're not supposed to be even affected by government. The only time our rights are supposed to be of the business of the government is when our rights clash. For example, I have a right to go through an intersection. Ron has the right to go through an intersection. And we hit each other because my right stops at the edge of his bumper. Well, now the question is, we do have certain things involved, like stoplights, to make sure we enjoy our rights without running into each other. Did somebody break that law? That's where government then gets involved, is when our rights clash. Otherwise, government's got no business regarding our rights. They're supposed to stay out of their rights. They're not there to guarantee you or to pay for it or force someone to accept your rights. That's not their job. That's not the language. It's negative language saying, stay out of it. Our rights are our rights. We'll deal with our rights. Don't put any obstacles. Don't make any laws that gets in the way of our rights. We'll pursue our rights. Now, if, once again, there's a clash of rights, then government's got to get involved for the legal reasons.
Yeah, addressing a couple questions in the chat real quick. First one, Conservative Cowboy says party systems are needed and good. Our problem is a uniparty. Now, the problem is that the national political parties are the problem because, and that's how the 17th Amendment.
Well, now, and I'm going to say this. Madison argued that political
Factions.
Parties are a natural,
sure,
thing that we do.
The problem is they get corrupted because they are national political parties. For example, Hollywood money goes and floods Georgia elections. That's not a representative republic. You need to keep money from crossing state lines.
Right.
Defund the national parties. You get a lot less corruption. Now, in 1913, they passed the 17th Amendment on the opposite argument, saying, look at these state legislatures. They're so corrupt. And they were right. There was corruption in the state legislatures. So what they decided to do was to centralize the corruption and basically allowed, if you're the type of people that have the kind of money to purchase politicians to enact legislation that favors you, then it's much easier if you just have to go to Washington, D.C. than to have to go to 50 state capitals.
Well, the best way to control corruption is to decentralize and and use localism as the primary function.
I think I truly believe that the solution to a lot of this stuff is going to be blockchain related, because with the blockchain fraud cannot occur.
Boy, that's a lot tougher sell than it was before SPX.
No. SPF operated FTX. Okay. Yeah. And FTX was a freaking exchange, and it was not crypto. That was the exchange is like a bank.
Well,
people I'm not gonna put their assets onto the exchange, and then he manipulated the assets. But the assets themselves were not bad. I'm saying.
It's a harder sell today than it was a year ago. Not saying I'm not saying it's not a good solution, but it's going to be tougher to sell.
But that has nothing to do with blockchain. That has to do with corruption at the exchange level or the bank level.
But it goes into garbage in, garbage out too. I mean, the blockchain is only going to be as good as the users and the people
the people were trusting the exchange with the people were trusting exchange with their assets. But blockchain doesn't necessarily need to be assigned to an asset. If you do something on the blockchain, the record is still there.
Right.
Yeah. Look, the blockchain voting, there's been a number of propositions for blockchain voting solutions. Some of them make sense. Now, I'm personally a bigger fan when it comes to voting of going back to in-person hand ballot. Let's dumb it down to analog at this point in time. But I think every machine can be hacked. Yeah, I just technology is.
Well, but again, you go back to in-person machine balloting, or if you're saying that voting has been corrupted for the last 200 years in Tammany Hall and all this stuff, well, you're still doing the old-fashioned paper balloting with that.
Yeah,
what I'm saying,
but the problem is the centralized location counting those.
Okay,
so decentralize it.
Yep. And it brings up a funny story about how the ward bosses, in the 1800s, you'd come to this country as an immigrant and you have to move to a big city and to get a factory job, and the ward bosses controlled the jobs, and their whole racket was basically they worked for a politician or a party, whether it be Republican, Democrat, Whig, what have you, and to get a job you had to promise you were going to vote the way they told you to. That's how they bought and sold votes. This is where we got the secret ballot, because they didn't know who you voted for. They couldn't exactly monitor that. That was the exact reason we got that. But this corruption with elections, it goes goes back as long as probably went all the way back to Greece, and they probably had the same issues. When there's that much at stake, human nature is you're going to have people that try to beat the system. So what you do is you have to create a system that has as few opportunities for shenanigans as possible. Simplify it, dumb it down. The more complex you get it, the more opportunities there is to manipulate a system. There's always going to be people that try to manipulate a system for their own benefit. That's just human nature.
All right. I'm out of time for the most part, but I want to address Derek real quick. It says the document that I believe is most important is Declaration of Independence, left out of school for a reason. Once you read it, you learn why. Declaration of Independence is very important. The Declaration of Independence is the desire and the want, and the Constitution is the fulfillment of that desire and want. They both run hand in hand in many ways, but the official legal document, the law of the land, is the Constitution. As good as the Declaration is, it is a founding document. It established independence, but it is not a legally
right. It's not binding. It's
right.
not
It's
binding.
not a legally binding document. Thank you.
Right. It's not a legally binding document, and you keep in mind that the Constitution was the second form of government of the United States. It wasn't the first.
Right.
The first was the Articles of Confederation.
First, right. Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the Confederate Constitution was essentially a hybrid of the two, where
Right.
they took the best elements of both and implemented it. So.
All right, so now, GH, we're not talking about reverting to past practices. Like I said, one of the practices that hasn't been used for a very long time, going all the way back, is localizing elections and decentralizing the counting. That I think is one of the keys. Definitely paper ballots and local voting is important, but precinct count, because see, the thing is, when you have a paper trail, then you can go back and say, hey, this is where it changed. This is what it originally was. We want that paper trail. We want the precinct counting. Then that number goes to the county. That number goes to the state, and so on and so forth. And there's a trail that is traveled so that it can be used for accounting purposes to audit in case there's an anomaly, an irregularity. But if you just send them all to one place and then they give you a number and that's over, where's
no accountability?
Where's the ability to audit it?
There's no accountability.
Right, exactly.
It's chain of custody.
Right.
And look, I work in financial services, and chain of custody for every single dollar is tracked. And it's more complex than it needs to be, but it's important. And because of that, people trust the banking system to some degree. Don't yell at me, Ron. I know what you're thinking. But at the end of the day, people put their paycheck into the bank, and then they realize that they're going to, when they go to the ATM, there's going to be money there, because there is accountability. Forensically, you can find it, and that matters. And if we set up a process that everyone can agree with, the result won't be questioned if the process was followed. And going back to GH's big question, there is: are we challenging the results? No, we're challenging the process. It wasn't followed. And if the process,
I challenge the results, because there ain't no way in hell anybody's going to make me believe that guy got more votes than. There's just no way. The numbers don't add up.
Well,
when you look down ballot, I don't care about all of the cases and all of the court cases and all that crap. When you look down ballot, the Republicans swept everything.
Whether I disagree with you or not, Ron, the problem is the process was set up in such a way that you don't have faith in the results.
I agree with that, but I do question the results.
And of course, there's also other pieces of evidence that show things. For example, I live in Riverside County in Southern California. If this area in Southern California is known as the Bible Belt of California. In fact, I probably live in the belt buckle of the Bible Belt here. And yet the elections last couple went a different way than would be normal.
Right.
They went very blue. Now, one of the things that happened in the last election is while they were counting, the cameras that were in the room on them counting, so that we caught them running a pre-recorded video rather than them being live. Well, why would they do such a thing? Right. So that brings up questions. So so there are also procedural questions that need to be answered.
Well, okay.
You know,
I love.
I know what the circumstantial evidence is and what
love-
it's saying. The
I
question is,
love-
why did they do it? What were they hiding?
I
Why
love
would
to
you
use-
suddenly not want the live feed to be there so that no one on the outside could see what you were doing?
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. I love to use the example of Kyrsten Sinema in 2018 in Arizona. Okay, Kyrsten Sinema won Maricopa County. Okay, Doug Ducey, the Republican gubernatorial candidate, won by 300,000 votes. Okay, Maricopa County. How in the world does the Republican gubernatorial candidate win by 300,000 votes, yet the Democrat senator wins the same area? I'm sorry, but that does not jive. That is a serious question of validity.
Do you want me to, you want me to play devil's advocate?
Now, that all said, I've got to
look-
Capistrano. It's an hour drive away. I got to get. So I'm going to duck out. You gentlemen, please continue the conversation. Audience, thanks for participating. I do teach U.S. Constitution classes here in Southern California live, and my next class starts at 6 my time. It's 4:11, and it's an hour and 15 minutes to get there. So I'm gonna get.
See you,
So
Doug.
I will see you guys later. Love you.
See you, Doug.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.
For those of you who do attend my live Constitution classes, there's no classes next week before Christmas, but we will be here. All right,
See
I'm
you,
out of
Doug.
here.
All right.
Appreciate you, gentlemen. Thank you for being
And I'm
here.
gonna
and listening.
I'm actually gonna kill the class because Brady and I can talk offline, but this was spirited and I definitely enjoyed it. But I'm not gonna entertain anybody just for the sake of entertaining.
Well,
anybody.
I didn't know if you guys had a conversation to finish. That's why I said it the way I
Yeah,
did.
Well, I do want to talk to Doug, or I do want to talk to him, but I'm going to talk to him offline. So.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
So ladies and gentlemen, united we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America. God bless you. I'll see you guys next week.
Thanks,
Adios.
everyone.
Yeah. All right,
Thank
guys.
you, everyone. Cheers.